Hi, this video is for Indian Arrival Day and what I learned about Indian indentured servitude, mainly over the last 6 years since I started my research. I wanted to know specific statistics for indentured servitude in Trinidad and Guyana. I finally learned that it lasted from 1838 to 1920 officially. 500,000 Indians went to the Caribbean. Over a million Indians went to 19 colonies around the world. And one of the main reasons that it was canceled was because the UK needed ships for World War I. My name is Melissa and I'm a trademark attorney. I'll talk more about that at the end of this video. I'm also Trini and Guyanese. I love history and wanted to know more about my own history. My parents and grandparents didn't know specifics. They were working hard in the fields or emigrating for a better life. And so about 6 years ago, I wanted to really dive into this. I bought all the books that I could find and research as much as I could on this topic. So in this video, I'll go over statistics, how to find your ancestors, and resources that I have used and I have found. These are really mostly the frequently asked questions that I get. Part 1, statistics. The slave trade ended in 1807, but slavery was not completely abolished until 1838. 5 million enslaved Africans were taken to the Caribbean. And when plantation owners could no longer enslave innocent Africans, they came up with a new plan to try to maximize their profits, whereby Indians would sign contracts to be indentured servants for a certain term. This was usually 5 years, and then they had the option to return to India. In reality, many didn't even have the option to return home to India, and they ended up staying in the Caribbean. But back to the beginning of indentured servitude. Indian indentured servitude began in 1838. Joseph Gladstone brought the first Indians to Guyana on the Whitby. The Hesperus ship also arrived on the same day, even though it left a few weeks later. The first ship that went to Trinidad was the Fatel Razak. That ship landed in 1845. The gap between 1838 and 1845 happened because there was a ban. The UK did not allow plantation owners to bring indentured servants because of all the inhumane conditions with the first sets in Guyana. Also, that 1845 season included the first ship that took indentured servants to Jamaica. 238,909 Indians went to Guyana, and 147,592 Indians went to Trinidad. For Guyana, 245 ships made 534 voyages. For Trinidad, 154 ships made 327 voyages. The last ship to return Indians from the Caribbean to India was in 1954. And just a quick reminder to please like this video and subscribe to this channel. It will help the algorithm to show it to others in our community, and it can let me know if you want to see more videos. I prefer to write blogs, but if enough people subscribe, I can try to make time to make these videos too, because I think it could reach a wider audience. So part 2, how can we find our Indian ancestors? I get this question very often, and I'm not the authority on this. I am still looking for most of mine, but here is what I have learned about the process so far. First, you should speak with your elders. Ask them what they know. Keep asking them questions. It could take years to get the answers that you are looking for. You have to keep asking in different ways. Maybe the more you ask, the more comfortable they will be explaining the history that they know of. I've been researching many years now, and my family knew this. And then earlier this year, I asked my dad who came on the ships for us, which grandparent was it specifically? And he said it was his grandma. They called her Daddy. All the kids were playing near the ship, and the crew lured them with candy, and then the ship sailed away. I asked him how he knew that because I know he didn't read Coolie Woman, which discusses many examples of these kinds of kidnappings. And he said in such a matter of fact way, oh, she used to tell us. But in those days, you couldn't really ask too many personal questions. It was seen as prying. Daddy came when she was about 8 years old. She came with others in her village. She eventually married someone from her village that was also on that ship. We don't know specifics about her parents because she did not tell anyone. And so many Indians probably came as indentured, but not all. I was operating under the assumption that it was mainly indentured until it was pointed out to me that we can't know this for sure until we see all of the papers. And then I was talking to someone in my husband's family, and she mentioned that one of her ancestors came to Guyana because they were promised a better life, and it was going to be a better life than in India. They were of a higher class or caste in India. They came with all of these gold coins in tins, and they came as a family. And then the child was eventually orphaned, and a cousin took her in, but the cousin took all of the money. So papers are not going to tell you all of this information. You have to ask as much as you can. If oral history skips one generation, it could be lost forever. And so the questions that you can ask and that I keep asking are, where were your parents born? Where were your grandparents born? What village did they live in? Did they live in any other village? What did they do for work? What is your favorite memory of them? So by asking all of these questions, you are trying to follow the trail where it would lead you. You ask a question, then you ask more questions about the answer you get. Another way that you can find information is to go through the documents. I'm going to start from the bottom. If you don't know your parents' name, check your birth certificate. If you don't know your grandparents' name, check your parents' birth certificate. If you don't know your great grandparents' name, check your grandparents' birth certificates. You can do this process using birth certificates, death records, and marriage records. Whatever records you could find might have the information that you are looking for. And when you can't go back any further, you can't find any more relatives in Trinidad or Guyana, this can give you an idea of a time frame of when an ancestor could have come from India. And then you can go back and you can check the ship records for that time frame. You will have different documents that are related to the ship records. And so I'm going to go over them generally. So there is a general register, which is a ship list of all the passengers that came on a specific ship. Then there's also the immigration pass that has more information about that specific passenger. The only thing that is online right now is the ships that came to Trinidad. To get the rest of records, you have to go in person to the archives office in Trinidad and in Guyana. These records are hundreds of years old. I don't want them to deteriorate and be lost forever. So I started a petition to have the UK government and the local governments scan and digitize these records. We don't want them to crumble and be lost. So please click the link in my description below to sign the petition. We want these records to be online and available for everyone to see it free of charge. There are also related journals that might discuss what happened during a specific voyage. Gayutra Bahadur read through these for her book Kuli Woman, and she summarized them for us. We also need these records preserved. I think most of these are in the archives in London. And so they gave us the backstory of what happened on that ship. You can also do a DNA test. This will tell you which part of India your ancestors came from. Lastly, there are genealogy groups that have additional information that you might be looking for. There are many for the different countries in the Caribbean. The Trinidad and Tobago genealogy group has a pinned post that lists the other genealogy groups on Facebook. So I highly encourage you to check that out for more information. Somebody might mention something that might be useful to you. So when we work together as a community, that can really help. So now I'm going to talk about my resources, and I have them all on my website, also westindiandiplomacy.com. So when I was starting my research, I reached out to Mr. David Dabadine, and he recommended India in the Caribbean. David Dabadine also has a great documentary that shows the state of the records in Guyana at the time that he was looking for his ancestors, and it was heartbreaking to see the records crumbling and not being preserved. You can watch this on YouTube. And so this was the first book I read about our history. It's a series of short essays that go over life in Guyana mainly. It also discusses Trinidad. And so one of the things that I learned for the first time was that there was this disproportionate ratio of men and women in the colonies at the time. And that resulted in a lot of violence between the men and against the women. So the government eventually imposed a quota of how many men and women should be going to the colonies to help reduce that. And Gayutra Bahadur, in her book Holy Woman, explained that that also could have led to the kidnapping of many women and children in India because the ship crew were trying to meet the quotas. And so this is India in the Caribbean, which was written by David or edited by David Dabadine and Brinsley Samaru, and I recommend this. Another great book is The Guyana Story from Earliest Times to Independence. And this is by Odin Ishmael. He was an ambassador for Guyana. And this is a great textbook like overview of the very earliest times, the Amerindians to independence. And so I really like this book as well. It's if you're starting from ground zero, you just want to know about your history. I like the general overviews, and then if you want to know specific information about a specific incident or a specific story, then you get a book on that. But I didn't know pretty much anything, and so I really like these broad overviews. And next, I have History of the People of Trinidad and Tobago by President Eric Williams. This is a similar broad overview from pre-colonial times to independence. He actually wrote this in 30 days for independence, and it is a broad overview, but it is also extremely detailed. And when you read this book, it's really uplifting to know that your ancestors and your people, they are here, they are existing now, and they went through so much. And so this is a really great book. It's an overview, but it is very detailed. My favorite book is Holy Woman by Gayutra Bahadur. If I had a budget just to buy one book to start my history, I would start with this one. And that's just my personal preference because she talks about the ships and the voyages, and that's really interesting to me. That's one of my interests. Holy Woman starts off about the author's journey to find her own history. But this author, she really deserves all the accolades and all the recognition because the information that she found, it's not available online and it's not easy to access. She had to go to London, to the archives, sift through these records and make sense of it. And she did that for us and she summarized it. She gave us anecdotes about what happened during these voyages because the general registers and the immigration passes, they're not going to tell us what happened on these ship voyages, but she does tell us. And so I really recommend this book. I can't say it highly enough. It's not an easy read. It's not a beginner level text. It could take you some time, but the information in here is like an encyclopedia. The other book that I read early on in my research was An Introduction to the History of Trinidad and Tobago by Bridget Brereton. And this is like an elementary school textbook, literally. It has assignments and things like that. But like I mentioned, this is what I wanted. This is what I was looking for, coming from not knowing pretty much anything about the history of Trinidad and Tobago. So this was great. It's great to start off with the basics and then get deeper as we go. I also have all these books. I'm sure came from Amazon, so you can find them. I will probably list them in a blog post that I'll link in this video. I recently got The Discovery of the Large, Rich, and Beautiful Empire of Guyana by Walter Raleigh. He wrote this about his 1595 journey to Guyana, and it was published in 1596. This is a republished version with edits in the 1800s. And so I'm not done with this yet, but it seems promising. I also have the USA in South America and other essays. It was edited by David Dabadine. It is an overview of what Chetty Jagan had to go through during the 50s and 60s when he was running for president initially. Okay, I have 3 more books that I have. This one is Children of Watuka, A Story of British Guyana. And this was written by someone who lived during a time where the bauxite and aluminum community was really big. And so I think they're from the US or Canada. They were living there at the time. And this is a book about his experience. The next book I have is India by John Key. It is a very dense book about the history of India. And you may not have known, I did not know, that India's history, pretty much up until colonialism, India was a bunch of different regions and kingdoms and maybe self-autonomous, and they weren't one unified nation. And then after colonialism is when they were essentially viewed by the world and eventually themselves as one unified country. But India is not one group of people. It is many groups, many regions, many languages, and that can be explained in this. And the last book that I have that I'm not finished reading is Roots. And I think that the movie series, both the older one and the more recent one, are so valuable for everyone to watch. And it's also very, enlightening for our own community, because what the enslaved Africans had to go through, it is not the same as the Indian indentured servants, but it's a similar and parallel concept that one generation you are in India, and then a few more generations in Guyana and Trinidad, and then the more recent generations have been in the US, UK, and Canada. And so the movie series, it really highlights how traditions can get lost, how languages get lost, but there's still this yearning, this remembrance for how it used to be. And so I think if you watch that, it would be a great way to kind of see what our ancestors could have gone through in a similar system, Indian indentured servitude, not the same, but similar. So this is an overview of what I learned and my research. You can find more at westindiandiplomacy.com. As mentioned in the beginning of the video, I'm going to talk about trademarks and what I do as a trademark lawyer. I help people protect their brand names, logos, slogans, and designs with trademark registrations. And the trademark process is 2 steps. Step 1 is the trademark clearance search, and step 2 is the application. What I will be discussing is just educational. This is not legal advice. You cannot get legal advice until you schedule a consultation and sign a legal retainer. I encourage every company to at least do a trademark clearance search, whether you are a new company, which is 1 person, or a big company with many people. If you just started yesterday, or if you've been in business for many years, you want to make sure that the name, logo, design that you're using is not already taken, or else the other owner can sue you for trademark infringement, and also your trademark application could get denied. And if you get sued for trademark infringement, you could have to pay them damages, all of your profits, and have to create a new name, which means new product packaging, marketing, everything, domain, website hosting, social media marketing. And so you should have a lawyer do a trademark clearance search, because a lawyer could check for the exact same name as someone else out there, and also similar names. You can still get sued if you are using a name that is too similar to something else. So the exact same name as someone else doesn't mean that you are, good to go. You should make sure that the name that you want to use is not too similar. And so step 2 is the application process. This is where you file an application to get your trademark registered. And it has many benefits, including deterring copycats. Also, the USPTO, they themselves will refuse to issue registration to someone else who has a mark that's too similar to yourself. And so this is kind of like having the USPTO police it for you. The registration also gives you national exclusive rights to that mark. You can stop someone from another state from using a trademark that you're using, even if you're not physically in that state yet. So trademarks are one of the biggest assets to a business. So make sure that you do the trademark clearance search. And I encourage you to file a trademark application for trademark registration also. I'd be happy to help you with this. You can either call my office or schedule an appointment yourself on my website. All the information will be in this video. Let's make sure our businesses are legally protected so we can be on a better playing field with all these other companies that are coming into the region. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please subscribe and let me know your questions in the comments below. Remember that our ancestors went through so much coming all the way from India to the Caribbean and having to work so hard in the fields and the factories, emigrating to start a better life elsewhere. All of that is in your DNA, and you are resilient and you are strong too.